The AI Seoul Summit, world powers and leading business figures agree upon the safe use and development of artificial intelligence, a key emerging issue for humanity. With the dispute between doctors and the government showing little sign of abating, the Prime Minister once again urges the medical community to come up with a reasonable, unified plan, hoping to find the middle ground. Dozens of fans who have a deep love for Korea are invited to the country for 5 days for the Visit Korea year. We take a closer look at who they are and how they feel about getting first-hand experience of the culture that they love so much. It's May 22nd, 2024. This is Newscenter. Good evening. Thank you for joining us. I'm Yoon. World leaders committed to ensuring the safety, innovation, and inclusivity of artificial intelligence in a 2-day AI Seoul Summit co-hosted by South Korea and the UK. Adopted there was the Seoul Declaration. Our correspondent Oh Soo-young begins our coverage.
South Korea, the United Kingdom, the United States and other world powers have called for stronger global cooperation to advance safety, innovation and inclusion in artificial intelligence to further human well-being and democratic values. This came in a joint Seoul Declaration following the AI Seoul Summit co-hosted by South Korea and the UK. On Tuesday evening Seoul time, President Yoon and British Prime Minister Rishi Sunak chaired the first closed-door session online, attended by the leaders of the Group of 7 Nations and Singapore, and the Vice Presidents of the United States and the European Commission. In his opening remarks, Yoon said that given the hyperconnectivity and borderless nature of the digital space, the world needs common digital norms to first ensure the safety of AI, minimizing the potential negative impact on societies and protecting well-being and democracy. He also called for free and open innovation to stimulate economic growth and tackle global problems like climate change, as well as to ensure all people benefit from the technology. Such points were reflected in this whole declaration reached by the participating countries and Australia. That document calls for enhanced cooperation on governing AI to mitigate risks, while promoting democratic values, human rights, the rule of law, and fundamental freedoms. It also raises the need for policy and governance frameworks that support socio-cultural and gender diversity, contribute to sustainable development, and help bridge the digital divide. To increase the shared understanding and design of such frameworks, a separate Seoul Statement of Intent builds on previous commitments to strengthen global research collaboration on AI safety. The 2-day Seoul Summit is a follow-up to the first AI Safety Summit held in England's Bletchley Park last year, where 28 governments recognised the significant challenges posed by AI, including in cybersecurity, biotechnology and the dissemination of misinformation. While 10 countries and the European Union adopted this whole declaration, Yoon noted it was reached by the heads of state and government, marking an upgrade from last year's ministerial Bletchley Declaration. It also expanded the scope of focus from AI safety to include innovation and inclusivity. Recognising the need to engage the core developers of AI, the summit also included leaders of 11 IT giants, including Samsung Electronics, Naver, Amazon, Microsoft, Meta and X, who agreed to adopt the voluntary AI safety commitments to prevent AI-related risks. Broader discussions are expected on Wednesday, with more countries, including China, attending the in-person ministerial session, alongside the AI Global Forum, to include a wider range of businesses and civil society. Oh Soo-young, Arirang News.
President Yoon says freedom and solidarity will end the tunnel of global uncertainty. The remarks were made during this year's Asian Leadership Conference here in the country under the theme of the era of hyper-uncertainty, innovative leadership for the new future. He also touched upon Korea's dismal birth rate, adding that this concern is not simply a domestic issue, but one that affects many other countries as well. That being said, he voiced hopes of seeking to better address the low birth rate and of sharing the lessons learned with Korea's counterparts. South Korea has reaffirmed its commitment to continue support for global nuclear security by making a financial contribution. Speaking at an international conference on nuclear security in Vienna on Tuesday, Second Vice Foreign Minister Kang In-sun announced that South Korea will contribute $2 million to the International Atomic Energy Agency. The money will be used to fund responses to future nuclear security threats. In addition, Kang said the country would actively participate in ensuring the safety of Ukraine's nuclear power plants. She also met with Raisi, Director General of the IAEA, and discussed the monitoring of Japan's wastewater release from the destroyed nuclear plant in Fukushima. Rare images have been captured of North Korea leader Kim Jong-un's portrait hanging alongside those of his father and grandfather. The South Korean government says this appears to be part of Kim's attempts to reinforce the cult of personality in the regime. Our North Korean affairs correspondent Kim Jong-sil explains.
The portraits of 3 generations of leadership in North Korea hanging on the wall have been spotted at a new school in Pyongyang during its opening ceremony. North Korea's state-run Korean Central News Agency reported this on Wednesday in its coverage of the event. The portraits of the 3 leaders from the Kim family can also be seen hanging above the blackboards in the school's classrooms. There were times when either Kim Jong-un's portrait was hung alone or those of his father and grandfather were. But this is one of the rare moments when all 3 were hanging side by side. Experts said the motive behind the display could have something to do with Kim's leadership recently facing difficulty due to him going against his predecessor's doctrine, which might have confused the population.
I think it came as a big burden when he made a statement that said that in North Korea's policy, there's not going to be any unification because you try to erase the footprints of the predecessors, his grandfather and father.
Professor Kim added there could be a clear statement behind the hanging of the portraits together.
He wants to portray, impart this message that it's not like he's going to eliminate footprints, heritages of his predecessors. Rather, he cherishes the achievements that his predecessors made.
South Korea's Ministry of Unification said it appears that Kim Jong-un is trying to show off his status and his recent revolutionary ideas, saying it was closely monitoring this rare occasion. Kim Jong-sil, Arirang News.
Russia has started exercises simulating the launch of tactical nuclear weapons, as earlier announced by its authorities. It's seen as Moscow sending a message towards the West amid the war in Ukraine. Lee Seung-jae has more.
Russia's Ministry of Defense announced Tuesday that under the instructions of Russian President Vladimir Putin, the first phase of tactical nuclear drills has begun in Russia's southern military district. The military drills, which are also taking place near Ukraine, simulate the use of nuclear weapons. The move is a response to what Moscow says are threats from the West and a message not to escalate tensions any further. The ministry explained that the tactical nuclear drills include training using the Iskander short-range ballistic missiles and the Kinzhal hypersonic missiles, which are capable of carrying nuclear warheads. Earlier this month, Putin ordered the defense ministry to prepare training to test the use of tactical nuclear weapons after the Kremlin took issue with comments made by French President Emmanuel Macron, who mentioned the possibility of sending troops to Ukraine. They also slammed British Foreign Secretary David Cameron, who said that weapons provided to Ukraine could be used to strike the Russian mainland. During his Victory Day speech earlier this month, Putin warned the West that its strategic forces are always ready for combat at all times and indicated that Russian and Belarusian forces have begun joint preparations for tactical nuclear weapons training. Russia's defense ministry on Tuesday released footage showing trucks carrying missiles to a field where launch systems had been set up. The military drills are taking place in Russia's southern military district in Rostov-on-Don, near the Ukrainian border, as well as the Donetsk, Luhansk, Zaporizhia, and Kherson regions, which Russia claims were newly incorporated during its special military operation against Ukraine. Lee Seung-jae, Arirang News.
Tens of thousands of Iranians gathered in Tehran to mourn the late president and other officials who died in a helicopter crash over the weekend. Although many turned out to mourn the late president, the sudden death sparked mixed reactions in Iran. Bae-Eun-ji has the details.
Mourners in black gathered in Tehran on Wednesday, some holding photos of the late president Ebrahim Raisi. Raisi's body was flown in from Tabriz, the closest major city to the remote crash site. Iran's supreme leader, Ayatollah Ali Khamenei, attended the funeral and performed prayers. Hamas chief Ismail Haniyeh and top leaders of Iran's paramilitary Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps were also at the funeral. It took place after Iran on Monday declared 5 days of mourning. Although many Iranians are mourning the late president, his death comes amid widespread public anger over worsening living standards and tightening political control. The New York Times said some even welcomed the loss, as the 63-year-old was seen as a key figure who oversaw the executions of dissidents and used violence to suppress and kill protesters. The BBC also reported that there was a sharp contrast in the reactions, with opponents celebrating Raisi's death as good news, but added many Iranians do not believe much will change, as the country's supreme leader holds ultimate power. Raisi was known for enforcing brutal crackdowns on protests over repressive laws, such as the mandatory hijab rules. Mass protests went on for months in Iran starting in late 2022 over the death of a 22-year-old woman, Mahsa Amini, who had been detained over allegedly not wearing a hijab. Following Raisi's death, there were jokes and sarcastic comments on social media, as well as photographs of protesters who were killed or maimed 2 years ago. Videos of fireworks in several cities across Iran were seen online, and some posted videos of themselves dancing in the streets. Raisi's body will be transferred to his hometown of Mashhad in eastern Iran for burial on Thursday. Bae-Eun-ji, Arirang News.
In the Middle East, relief workers are sounding the alarm in Gaza as essential food delivery into Rafah is suspended amid supply shortages and security concerns. Kim Bo-kyung has this report.
Catastrophe, nightmare. This is how one United Nations official described the situation in Rafah, calling it hell on earth. After Israel closed the Palestinian side of the Rafah land crossing with Egypt earlier this month, the humanitarian situation has been worsening. According to the UN Agency for Palestinian Refugees on Tuesday, food distribution in Gaza's southern city of Rafah has been suspended due to a lack of supplies. Saying the impact of incursions and evacuation orders are being felt all over Gaza, the head of the World Health Organization called on Israel to lift restrictions on aid into Gaza on Tuesday.
At a time when the people of Gaza are facing starvation, we urge Israel to lift the blockade and to let aid through.
The UN World Food Programme is reportedly re-evaluating logistics, looking for alternative routes within Gaza after deliveries from a U.S.-made pier stopped on Sunday. U.S. President Joe Biden previously ordered the American military's construction of the pier and dock, and the first 10 trucks had entered through the pier on Friday. But this ended up chaotic, with much of the aid looted and 1 Palestinian man dead, resulting in the aid deliveries being stopped. The WFP said that the pier project for delivering aid to Gaza may fail unless Israel starts providing the conditions the humanitarian groups need to operate safely. Meanwhile, Israel on Tuesday shut down the Associated Press's live camera feed as Israel claimed that the news agency was providing Al Jazeera with content. Israel's communications department returned camera and broadcast equipment it had seized from the media outlet after facing a backlash from U.S. officials and press groups. This comes weeks after Israel shut down Al Jazeera's operations in the country, citing a recently approved law that enables it to temporarily close 4 networks in Israel that are considered a threat to national security. Kim Bo-kyung, Arirang News.
Amid junior doctors extending their walkout, the government is once again urging the medical community to present a reasonable, unified plan and to engage in talks. Our Lee Soo-jin tells us more.
While the South Korean government and the medical community agree that communication is necessary, the ongoing rift continues as both sides remain at impasse. Prime Minister Han Duck-soo, in a meeting on Wednesday, once again asked the medical community to present a reasonable and unified plan for the medical school admission quota, saying that the government is ready to engage in talks in any form whenever. This comes amid doctor organizations such as the Korean Medical Association and the Korean Intern Resident Association standing firm in demanding that the medical admission quota plan be scrapped before they participate in talks. And only a few junior doctors returned to work on Monday, despite it marking 3 months since their absence began. Under the relevant law, junior doctors are only allowed up to 3 months off to qualify for the specialty certification exam the following year. According to a survey conducted by the Health Ministry of 100 major hospitals as of Monday, only 659 junior doctors have returned, which is only 5.1% of the total junior doctors in the nation. Prime Minister Han also said that 16 out of the 32 medical schools have completed amendments to their medical school admission plans for next year, with the government also pledging to work closely with the remaining schools. The Korean Council for University Education will hold a University Admissions Committee meeting this week where it will review and approve the amendments submitted and announce the new admission guidelines next week. This comes after the Seoul High Court last Thursday ruled in favor of the government and rejected an application submitted by medical students, exam candidates, professors, and trainee doctors to halt the government's plan to expand the number of new medical students by 2,000 starting in 2025. And to address the ongoing shortage of doctors at hospitals, the Prime Minister also pledged to dispatch 120 more doctors from military hospitals starting Thursday, in addition to the 427 military and public health doctors that have already been deployed. Lee Soo-jin, Arirang News.
The presidential office and the ruling People Power Party will hold weekly policy coordination meetings for better communication. That's according to a high-ranking official at the top office on Wednesday. The officials said the meeting will be attended by the Presidential Chief of Staff for Policy, the PPP's Head of Policy Committee, and the Vice Minister of Finance, among others. The agenda for these weekly meetings will not be revealed, as the group will be discussing ongoing matters that are not yet fully decided. Such a move comes after the government tried to ban non-KC certified items being purchased directly from overseas, prompting public backlash, while also looking as if the government and the party were not in close coordination. South Korea has reported its third outbreak of African swine fever, an animal disease fatal to pigs this year. The Central Disaster Management Headquarters said on Tuesday that pigs on a farm located in the inter-Korean border county of Cheolwon in Gangwon-do Province were confirmed to have been infected. Under emergency guidelines, about 1,200 pigs raised on the farm will be culled. Also, from Tuesday evening, a 48-hour travel ban was issued for livestock facilities, including slaughterhouses, in the province, as well as other vulnerable areas. Following the confirmed case, the authorities pledged to strengthen disinfection and quarantine measures against the deadly animal disease. On the cultural front, the government has designated 2023 to 2024 as Visit Korea Year, and there's much to enjoy if you are interested in visiting the country. As part of the project, dozens of foreign nationals who deeply love or have special ties to Korea have been invited to visit the country. Our culture correspondent Song Yoo-jin brings you this story.
It's a dream come true for Zevra Ted, a 76-year-old YouTuber and former programmer. Popular for his Korean drama reviews and songs by his favorite artist, IU, which led IU to invite him to a concert in July, Zev is currently visiting Korea. Though he's visited Korea before, this trip is particularly special.
I can't tell you how happy I am. I'm absolutely thrilled. You know, I got here at 4:30 in the morning this morning, but I'm too excited to lie around in a hotel room. Okay, they said, oh, take a rest and come for the luncheon. No, I'm not going to miss anything.
Zev is among the 49 invitees in the Korea Invites You program organized by the Culture Ministry and the Korea Tourism Organization. So among the more than 77,000 applicants from 185 countries and receiving recommendations from overseas branches of the Korea Tourism Organization, 49 people were chosen for the Korea Invites You program, a 5-day trip to Korea where they'll get to experience Korean culture firsthand.
We organized this program as part of the 2023 to 2024 Visit Korea year. Our goal was to invite people from around the world who have a deep love and interest in Korea, as well as those with unique stories connected to our country. We want to show our appreciation for their ongoing support and share new and exciting aspects of Korean culture with them.
Take Chunny Chen, for example. She and her 9 high school friends are visiting Korea together again after 20 years. Taipei's Wesley Girls High School has been selecting Korea as its graduation trip destination since 2004, with Chen's class being the first.
I've been to Korea many times, as have my classmates. But this trip, coming back together, is even more special. Many places have changed a lot since we last visited, so we're experiencing a lot of the current Korean culture. We wore hanbok 20 years ago and will do so again tomorrow. We're really looking forward to it.
After a welcoming ceremony on Tuesday, the group headed to 1 Million Dance Studio, the largest of its kind in Korea. There, they learned K-pop dance moves from chief choreographer Choi Young-jun. It was an unforgettable moment for Alex, one of Malaysia's biggest social media influencers with over 6 million followers on TikTok. Known for his K-pop dance covers, he was even named one of the best dancers of the day.
I think K-pop has one of the best choreography and dance paired together. So I just started covering in my bedroom alone with my camera in front. So to be able to stand here and learn the choreography from the choreographer himself was really meaningful to me because he represents everything that I've been standing for and my whole content as a general. And I think it'll mean a lot to my followers as well.
The day wrapped up with chimek, chicken, and baekju, which means beer in Korean. Participants enjoyed the beloved Korean combination of crispy fried chicken, fresh draft beer, and the traditional rice wine, makgeolli, toasting their future adventures in Korea.
I'm half Korean. My mother is Korean, my father is English, and my special story with Korea is that I have learned so much about my culture through promoting it online, and I want to share that love with my followers. I host events, I do supper clubs, I teach people about hanbok and the history of Korean food and culture, and in doing that, I've learned more myself about Korean culture.
The group will split into 5 subgroups, each exploring different themes like Korean culture, food, and wellness before heading home on Friday. 송유진, Arirang News.
The eastern parts of the country that were cool yesterday were hot today like it was early summer. The early summer heat continued across the country. If you look at today's highs, most parts of the country in yellow were as high as 30 degrees Celsius. Inland areas of Gangwon-do Province soared up to 31 degrees during the daytime. This heat will be seen tomorrow as well. These early summer-like conditions will continue for the rest of the week nationwide. However, there will be showers in western Gangwon-do and northern Gyeongsang-buk-do provinces on Friday. Tomorrow, Seoul will start off at 16 degrees, Daegu and Gwangju 17 degrees. Daily highs will move up to 26 in Seoul and Busan, Gyeongju 32 degrees. Rain is expected to begin in Seoul and other areas on the weekend and continue until Monday. That's all for Korea. Here are the weather conditions around the world.
And that is Newscenter for tonight. Thank you for watching. A panel session up next.
Welcome. 엄청난 에너지를 춤으로 뿜어내는 나라. 감당할 수 있겠니? 웰컴. 시간 불이 꺼지지 않는 나라. 감당할 수 있겠니? 하나, 둘, 셋. Hey, Mr. Cupid, who's mine? Make sure you listen to what I say. I may be stupid or quite naive. 끝없이 쏟아지는 포토스팟. 휴대폰 한 대로 감당할 수 있겠니?
Short ribs in Korea are done like this. We've got get rid of some of the oil and blood. Your grater. Garlic. Got our beautiful sauce here. Your shiitake mushrooms. They're still pretty tough right now. By flambeing or making the fire, all that. Oh, money.
president also remains committed to boosting Korea's ties with its global partners on the sidelines of this latest.
To discuss the current security environment.
The United Nations most powerful body on global security, expressing hope.
Stock markets around the world have taken a hit amid speculation that the U.S. Federal Reserve
Arirang.
Exactly 142 years ago today, Korea and the U.S. established diplomatic relations. The two countries have spent more than half a century as allies, and the alliance, touted as one of the world's most successful and enduring, has now become the linchpin of regional security. But Seoul and Washington face growing challenges from many directions amid a rapidly evolving geopolitical environment, growing protectionism of national interests, and political polarization in both countries. And this edition of Within the Frame, we examine the key issues surrounding the Korea-U.S. alliance and their prospects. Joining me in the studio is our weekly commentator, Kim Jong-un, Senior Research Fellow at the Institute for National Security Strategy. It's always a great pleasure to have you with us.
Likewise, good to be here.
We also have VOA correspondent Jessica Stone joining us from Washington, D.C. It's great to see you again.
Good evening.
All right, Dr. Go, let's kick things off with you. Korea and the U.S. have been expanding their alliance beyond traditional boundaries in recent years. How do you assess the current state of South Korea-U.S. alliance, and what would you pick as the biggest threat that could undermine the centuries or decades-old military partnership?
Well, it feels like centuries, and in that sense, that it's very solid, and then it's very robust, and has been evolving. I mean, people don't remember the fact that the ROK-US alliance had up and downs throughout history. But then I think right now we are enjoying one of the best moments of the alliance. So the alliance between the South Korea and the United States started out mostly as a military alliance. So it's about the protection of South Korea against North Korea mostly, but has evolved into the so-called global comprehensive alliance. Now the South Korea and the United States are essentially trying to align their policies in many different domains, not just in the defense, but then also in economy, trade, in fact, diplomacy. We are also talking about defending the same values that we share, democracy and freedom. And so in that sense, I think Korea has become not just a linchpin for the regional security, but also a major partner for the United States for the global governance, I would say. So in that sense, I think we have to commend both countries for having achieved such a great state of development in terms of alliance. Also, you said there's no many comparisons like this around the world, and I'm sure in the United States, they see South Korea as an upstanding partner when it comes to cooperation, as well as working together on many different challenging tasks that we face together. But then, unfortunately, clearly there are clouds over the horizon. And now I guess the major challenge, we have to say this, is the fact that there's a growing domestic skepticism about alliance, not just about the ROK-US alliance, but the alliance in general. And some parts of the political class in Washington, you mentioned about the possible return of the former President Donald Trump. He's even on the trail criticizing the US allies, mostly in Europe. Less so when it comes to the Asian countries that are allied with the United States, such as Korea and Japan. But nonetheless, the same argument applies here, which is the fact that the allies of the United States are not really bearing the fair share of the burden when it comes to its own defense, as well as providing other types of global goods, global common goods. So I think South Korea is working very hard to counter this kind of accusations, and I think South Korea is willing to do more. And we are seeing these kind of actions, especially with the change of administration from President Moon Jae-in to President Yoon Suk-yeol. Right now, today, in Seoul, there's an AI global conference going on because South Korea wants to take the leadership when it comes to formulating a global joint response to not just exploiting the opportunities of artificial intelligence, which there are plenty, but also potential downsides. So in that sense, I think this is exactly kind of role that the U.S., United States has been expecting from its allies, and Korea is more at the forefront of delivering on these expectations.
So you picked growing skepticism about alliance as one of the big threats that could undermine South Korea-U.S. alliance. Now, Jessica, the hottest issue of the South Korea-U.S. alliance right now is perhaps the defense cost sharing that will take effect from 2026. The two sides kicked off their second round of negotiations in Seoul yesterday to decide how much Korea should shoulder to support U.S. troops stationed in Korea. What have you learned so far about Washington's stance on the matter?
Well, I'm afraid defense officials are pretty tight-lipped here in Washington about what's the state of play in those negotiations in Seoul. But the American chief negotiator, Linda Specht, said Saturday when she arrived that these talks are about the importance of the alliance and the support that the U.S. and South Korea give each other. And she's previously taken the position, which is Washington's position, that Washington is looking for a, quote, fair and equitable outcome in these talks. This round's goal, of course, as you mentioned, is to really get down to more specifics on cost sharing between the two countries and a distribution of defense costs. As you know, Seoul has already agreed to raise the payment by 13.9% between 2019 and 2021. So there's no argument in the Biden administration that Seoul is not meeting the moment in that sense.
So many local news outlets here say that an intense tug-of-war is expected between the two sides to set the details, such as the scale of cost sharing, of course, and the various standards that will be the base of calculating defense amounts. And from my understanding, the negotiations stretched to up to 10 rounds in the past. So we'll see how long it'll take this time around. Dr. Go, as the U.S. presidential election nears, concerns are rising over presidential candidate Donald Trump's America First policy and its impact on South Korea-U.S. alliance. But Korean ambassador to the U.S., Cho Hyun-dong, has said that he reassured that the alliance is unshakable and that it will be even strengthened further because it is an institutionalized cooperation. What are your thoughts on this?
So what Ambassador Cho Hyun-dong meant by institutionalizing the alliance is the fact that essentially the United States are carving out a unique domain for South Korea and its policies around the world, especially when it comes to the Indo-Pacific area. So I can take an example, for instance, when it comes to cybersecurity, United States cannot go alone. It's very costly, and then there are many countries in the Asia-Pacific region, and the United States cannot have taking care of all these countries to ensure their cybersecurity, then somebody else has to step in. And there are countries like Korea, Japan, Australia. So, the United States has created, in fact, a policy framework where the United States will have to depend on its allies to achieve its policy goals in this region. And so we have many applications of such framework in other policy domains as well. So if, say, there's a change of heart in Washington and tries to change U.S. policy in the Indo-Pacific, then the United States will have to not just change overall policy, but also find new partners. And that's going to be very challenging. So essentially, South Korea, Japan, Australia have become default partners for the United States. And this is going to be unshakable, as Ambassador Cho has pointed out, and also very difficult to remove. So this is the intention behind this. But in addition to that, there are other aspects to institutionalization of the alliance. So we don't really recognize this as a manifestation of the ROK-US alliance, but in fact, you can see this as an extension of the alliance. For instance, the Camp David agreement, where the Korea, Japan, and the United States, the three countries have declared that they're going to work very closely together, not just in matters of defense, but also in technological development and other areas. This is another form of extension of the alliance. So when we are involving third countries into the mix, then it becomes very difficult to remove United States out of the equation, for instance. So everything is about raising the political cost to changing the whatever strategy the U.S. has right now in this part of the world. So if there's a political change in Washington, then there's a different idea about the alliance, but it's going to be very costly and time-consuming for a new government in Washington to change the structure that already exists. So essentially, it's the idea that whatever solution you see right now is the best solution the United States will ever have, and that it will involve Korea. That's the idea.
And so it'll be hard, difficult, even for former President Trump to drastically change the structure that has been set between South Korea and the U.S. for their alliance. Now, Jessica, the U.S. presidential election is now less than 6 months away, and like it or not, it'll be a rematch between Biden and Trump. Where do they each stand on the Korea-U.S. alliance and key issues surrounding it?
Well, they have very different approaches, as Dr. Go has outlined. And I think what's interesting about the way that he addressed your question in terms of solidifying the framework of alliances in the region, which is the Biden administration's approach to the region, is that it also allows a president like President Trump, if he were to win again, to say, look, we're farming out. We are not taking ownership the way we did of Afghanistan, of Iraq, of unilateral action. And that's very appealing to parts of the American electorate that don't want to see the United States prosecute wars around the world by itself. So yes, President Trump, I think, has been pretty clear about where he stands in terms of alliances. He is much more in favor of bilateral agreements and bilateral relationships than multilateral relationships and multilateral organizations. And he has continued to call for more cost sharing between South Korea and the United States when it comes to the 28,000 U.S. troops stationed on the peninsula. In terms of North Korea, though, there's less daylight between the two administrations. Certainly on the diplomatic side, the Trump administration took the position, as you well recall, that they would negotiate directly with Kim Jong-un and they would have open lines of communication. And that was in keeping with President Moon's approach, too, at the time. We are seeing that both administrations, though, take the same position on denuclearization. There is no daylight there, where both administrations, past and current, have said that that is not negotiable, that North Korea needs to denuclearize. That having said that, certainly the Biden administration has taken many more pains, as we've been discussing, to establish and solidify alliances in the region to not only counter North Korea, but to counter China, to take positions on what's going on between Russia and North Korea and Russia and China. And they found a very willing partner there with South Korea. It has to be pointed out, of course, too, that the Biden administration is doing this at a time where they are taking a lot more resources and time with what's going on in Ukraine and with what's now going on in Gaza. And so they need their alliances around the world to continue to reinforce the rule of law and the world order that the post-World War order after World War II that the United States and South Korea and other major democracies have upheld since that time.
So you mentioned that one thing that both Biden and Trump agree on is the fact that the need to denuclearize North Korea. But from my understanding, there are growing calls in Washington to sort of very reluctantly, accept North Korea as a nuclear power and move on to disarmament talks. So we'll keep close tabs on that issue as well. Now, the issue of South Korea's nuclearization has also resurfaced after remarks made by Elbridge Colby, a leading candidate for America's next top security advisor should Trump win the election. He said South Korea's nuclear armament should no longer be seen as off limits, saying the U.S. may not be able to live up to its defense commitments to South Korea if North Korea can conduct nuclear attacks on American cities. While many here in South Korea are also voicing concerns about this, what is the Biden administration's take?
Well, the Biden administration, and certainly in the Washington Declaration last April, reinforced that the nuclear umbrella of the United States would apply to South Korea. And in so doing, is really taking the position that there's no need for South Korea to become a nuclear power. And as we know, Washington said that it's prepared to use its nuclear capabilities in the defense of South Korea to deter specifically North Korea. And this is a strategy that Washington has and been taking. It's resulted in about 95% of the world's countries choosing not to develop nuclear weapons because of this promise of the nuclear umbrella. So that is the current position of the Biden administration on that.
All right. Now, Dr. Kool, North Korea fired several short-range ballistic missiles into the East Sea just a day after President Putin held a summit with Xi Jinping of China. How do you see this?
So I don't think it's an expression of displeasure at the meeting between President Xi and President Putin. I think it could be more of a marketing move on the part of North Korea. I mean, it's kind of an interesting take, I would say. I don't think it was directed at South Korea per se. I mean, South Korea is now in the middle of carrying out military drills right now. So I think what's interesting is that looking into the type of short-range ballistic missile that they tested, it didn't involve the type of missile that North Korea apparently exported to Russia for their use in Ukraine. So, there's a recent visit by a Ukrainian delegation. They had an interview with KBS, Korean national broadcaster, and they reported that the Ukrainian government found out that Russia had fired 60 KN-23 ballistic missile in Ukraine, and this KN-23 missile is the potentially theater-level tactical missile that's capable of carrying a nuclear warhead. And this is a very sophisticated missile. It can avoid missile defenses. So essentially, it's a very expensive form of missile. Whereas the missiles that North Korea tested a couple of days ago, these are much simpler version. It's still guided. There's enough range to reach South Korea. It's a range of 300 kilometers. But it's a much cheaper, economical, mass production version of a short-range ballistic missile. So it's possible that North Korea is trying to market those missiles to Russia now. Russia has a huge need for short-range ballistic missiles. The ones that they got from North Korea are the ones that North Korea wants to deploy in their own country to target South Korea. So we have to remember that since September last year, 2023, North Korea has been very not passive, but very quiet, relatively speaking, in terms of missile testing. For instance, the testing of KN-23 essentially came down to zero after September last year. And the reason is because they diverted all their missile production for export to Russia. So now North Korea is trying to replenish the missile stocks. They are using cheaper versions, and chances that we might see some of these missiles that North Korea tested last week in Ukraine in the near future.
So firing the short-range ballistic missiles right after the Putin-Xi summit was North Korea's strategic marketing move to boast the capacity of its missiles. I think it's quite interesting how you put it that way. Now, Jessica, Putin and Xi issued a joint statement, a large part of which was dedicated to slamming the U.S. and the West. It said the U.S. and its allies must halt military intimidation against North Korea and what they called Washington's destructive and hostile course. How is the U.S. reacting to the criticism?
Well, the U.S. really isn't changing course in response to those comments. Not surprisingly, the reaction has been to double down on tariffs, as we've seen, against Chinese EVs, to deny China access to not only U.S. markets for some of their products, but to U.S. technologies and to Western technologies that underpin their development with AI, with supercomputing. As we know, Treasury officials here have said that the world can't allow China to basically use the playbook that it used to rise economically thus far, which is to flood the market with cheap goods that are subsidized and put other countries and other industries out of business as a result. Washington has continued also to put pressure on Beijing with respect to its relationship with Moscow and North Korea in its war against Ukraine, or I should say its relationship with Moscow when it comes to Ukraine, arguing that the PRC can't have deeper connections with Europe and with Western countries and Western democracies at the same time supplying Russia with some of the things that it needs to prosecute that war in Ukraine. The Biden administration has continued to ask Beijing to use its influence to discourage Moscow from cooperating with North Korea or from becoming a source of weapons there. But as Dr. Gov't pointed out, there's little evidence that that's been advice that's been heeded. And we have also seen the continuation of the use of sanctions on the part of Washington. Biden administration sanctioning 5 Russia-based groups for transferring North Korea weapons just last week. Biden has been pretty clear that he believes that Xi is a dictator and that Putin is a killer. And so behind those two very succinct characterizations of those leaders is a policy that doesn't appear to be wavering in terms of how it's interacting with this part of the world.
So I think that the message from Washington to China is very clear, that it should stop supporting Russia in its fight against Ukraine. Now, Dr. Go, many had anticipated that Putin may drop by North Korea after concluding his trip to China, but there was no such visit. And some experts say that it may reflect President Xi Jinping's discomfort, if you will, in the emergence of China-Russia-North Korea axis. What's your take?
So clearly, there's certain truth to that. I think China doesn't. I mean, I think China is concerned about not so much the substance, but the optics of the perception that Beijing, Moscow, and Pyongyang are closely aligned against the West. China, unlike Russia, North Korea, is still incrementally actively engaged with the West in trades and investments. So clearly, China also wants to give the perception that China is very much active in creating this bloc of authoritarian regimes. But on the other hand, in terms of substance, clearly China is assisting Russia with their increasing their wartime weapons production, also helping North Korea to evade the sanctions that are currently in place. So I think what was happening was China probably cares about the perception, but not to the extent that would prevent somebody like Vladimir Putin from going to North Korea. Clearly, there's something else at play, or in combination with many other different factors. One major factor could have been North Korea's own pride when it comes to this kind of diplomatic moves, because North Korea wants to be seen as a peer power equal to China and Russia, at least in terms of influence, and at least in its capability to cause trouble. So I think they want to get the respect that it deserves as a peer power to China and Russia. So if President Putin had gone to Pyongyang after his visit to China, then it would create the perception that North Korea is a second-tier power compared to China. So I think that could have been hurt Kim Jong-un's pride. And now that, especially now that Russia that depends on North Korea for weapons rather than the other way. So that could have been one factor. And second could be reticence on the part of Russia from going to Pyongyang, because that could be considered to be a red line for South Korea. Russia, despite the image they projects as a major power that's taking the initiative and is essentially is about to claim victory in Ukraine, it's right now in a very weak position. Its wartime weapons production is it's not really growing as fast as Putin wants, faces a lot of strong sanctions, and there's a domestic discontent because of the war, because of the high cost of the war. So for Russia, it's very important that South Korea stays on the sidelines. If South Korea decides to lend direct military assistance to Ukraine, that could potentially change the direction of the war on the ground in Ukraine. So, and then for that, it's imperative for Russia not to provoke South Korea too much. So, for instance, going to Pyongyang, Putin going to Pyongyang will be one such instance. So I think not a single factor played a role in preventing Putin from going to North Korea, but the combination of all these factors probably prevented Putin from going to Pyongyang this time around.
So the President Putin not visiting Pyongyang as many had anticipated, not just reflects Xi Jinping's thoughts, but also various other factors as well. And it looks like, although the emergence of China, North Korea, Russia axis, it looks like it's becoming clearer than before. But even so, when looking closer into respective countries and interests and tactics, they all have different diplomatic tactics to seek their own national interests. All right, thank you so much, as always, Dr. Go and Jessica, for sharing your valuable insights.
My pleasure.
My pleasure.
And that brings us to the end of the show. Thank you for watching, and be sure to tune in same time tomorrow to join our conversation. Goodbye for now.